I would like to take this opportunity to thank Infosectrain for inviting me today. Now, before we proceed further, just a little bit about myself. I've been in this industry for more than a decade now and currently working as a security architect with a global financial service organization. Previously, I have taken up multiple responsibilities in various domains like application security, auditing and compliance, security operations, and identity and access management, etc. I would have definitely loved to know about all of you, but I guess that's going to take up the entire hour. So probably we can keep that for our next session. And if you have any questions regarding the webinar that we are going to see today, you can just take a note and we can discuss them after the session. I hope that works for everyone. So, certified cloud security professional. Now, what exactly the CCSP or it's a exam being offered by IC Square, and it's a vendor neutral exam, which means it doesn't talks about specifically any technology or any specific service providers or cloud vendors like AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud Platform. It just talks general about what should be the security and governance policies in the cloud should look like. And who should be taking up this exam? Probably if your organization is planning to move your application to the cloud, and if you have if you have been given a responsibility to choose the right service provider for yourself, then this certification would definitely help you in looking for the right cloud vendor for your organization. That how you need to choose the right service provider, and how you need to decide what is the security posture for a cloud vendor looks like. Or if you are working for the service providers, then probably it would help you in deciding, because definitely you're going to onboard a lot of customers into your cloud services. It is going to help in choosing, defining how to isolate your tenants, um, and what are the legal aspects that you need to take care. So that's how this certification is going to help you. Now, I'm hoping that a lot of you must know that the CCSP exam pattern has changed starting August 1st, 2019. Now, previously, there's not much changes in terms of the syllabus and the content, but yes, there are bits and pieces that have been changed. As we grow in technology, a lot of things that keeps on evolving that needs to be included in the exam syllabus as well. So we are going to quickly have a glimpse of how the older CCSP used to look like and how it is different to the new version. So domain 1 in the previous CCSP exam used to be called as architectural concepts and design requirements. It used to have an exam weightage of 19%. Now the new domain is being called as cloud concepts, architecture and design. And you can see that they have changed the exam weightage from 19% to 17%. So yes, definitely it is one of the most important one of the most important domains that you need to know in a better way to score good in the exams. And domain 2 is cloud data security, which used to have an exam weightage of 20%. Now it is of 19%. But it talks about a lot of cloud data lifecycle and everything. But yes, a very important domain from the exam perspective. The next domain is cloud platform and infrastructure security. So, and it used to have a exam weightage of 19%. So it used to talk high level about how the security in the platform as a service and infrastructure as a service should be taken care of. Now from the new exam content, it is 17% of the exam weightage. Now moving forward, we have cloud application security, which has the domain weightage, which used to have the domain weightage of 15%, but now it has been changed to 17%. It talks briefly about how the security in the software as a services should look like. The domain 5 of CCSP used to call as operations, and relatively it was not, it used to carry the less weightage of 15%, but now moving forward in the, as per the new exam pattern, it is 17%. So more questions we can expect from this domain, and it is also called as cloud security operations. So, and yes, the last domain is legal and compliance. It used to have the exam weightage of 12%, and now the new domain is called as legal risk and compliance, and it has the domain weightage of 13%. So, relatively less questions from the legal aspect, but yes, definitely important from the exam perspective. Okay, what are the exam specifics? So, if you have seen the one of the most gruesome exams of the IC square, that is CCSP, and it used to have the 6 hours of the long marathon with 250 questions. And so IC square decided to take that, change that 6 hours format into 3 hours a couple of years back. I believe it happened in December 2017 when they moved from linear to CAT format. And CCSP, since 2015, it used to have 4 hours of the exam. So what IEC Square is planning or has planned to make the uniform time duration for each and every exam. So they changed the time duration, the length of the exam for CCSP as well. So it used to have 4 hours, now it is 3 hours. Is it less? No, 3 hours, I believe it is more than enough to complete 125 questions. That is what the number of questions you'll get in the exam. Out of which you will need to, the 25 questions would be the beta questions, which are present there, but they are only for the research purpose. If you score right on those questions, you'll not be marked, or you'll not be scored you'll not be given any marks for them. So, and the surprising part is the exam taker do not know which question is the beta question or which is there for the research purpose. So it is completely transparent for the exam takers. The question formats, most of the questions are multiple choice. You will be presented with a question and given 4 choices to answer them. But yes, they do have the drag and drop format as well. So what we used to see in our childhood, the match the columns, where you need to see the options on the left hand side and you need to find the appropriate alignment to the right hand side. You just need to drag and put the right choices there. So that those kind of questions are also in the exam. Now, passing grade, you need to score 700 marks out of 1,000. So it means 70% is a passing mark. So now it doesn't mean that for the 100 questions that each and every questions are equally weighted. No, so that's not the case. So it's not the case that each and every question would be of 10 marks. So there would be a question which would be of 5 marks, and there would be a question which would be of 15 marks. It all depends on the difficulty level. So yes, and no negative marking, so probably you can go ahead and make your guesses and do not leave any questions. That would be my advice. What is the exam mindset that one should keep while attempting the questions? Now, the list that is right in front of you, that's not the complete exam mindset. I just tried to put down the major chunks and which I felt is the kind of important things that you need to think before attempting any questions. So that needs to be taken care of. But yes, this is not the limited, it's just the crux of the high level of what we read in the entire CBK. We are quickly gonna go one by one to all the points that I've mentioned here. So the first point is capex to opex is the driving factor for cloud. Now, what exactly and why exactly an organization plan to move to the cloud? It is all about shifting from capital expenditure to operating expenditure. What exactly that means? So let's say if an organization is into food business or probably retail business, they just sell foods. They should be only focusing on the taste of food that they are delivering to their customers. they shouldn't be focusing on the kind of infrastructure or IT infrastructure that is supporting their business. So that is their capital expenditure if they keep on investing on that. So if they kind of outsourced it, that is what shifting from capital expenditure to operating expenditure. Uh, so that is one of the major driving factor for moving to the cloud. The next point is cloud customers ultimately accountable for its security. Now, what say an organization it chooses a cloud vendor in any cloud service provider. And so let's say if any customer chooses a cloud vendor and uh, and there's some kind of breach happens to the service provider. Now, yes, definitely, that financial stipulation would be the service provider would be accountable for. But what about the reputational impact, and what about the customer impact? Financial impact is just one aspect of the loss that any breach or any breaches experience. The reputation is also at stake. So that is where it's a customer's responsibility to choose wisely while they are opting for a cloud service provider. They should be performing entire due diligence, and a lot of things needs to be captured in the contractual agreement, which brings us to the our next point, that each and every roles and responsibilities should be properly captured in the contractual agreement. Now, who is responsible for what? That needs to be clearly defined along with the legal aspects. So that is very important and necessary while preparing the contract for engaging any service provider. Now, when we choose the cloud service provider, the security is one of the majority of the concern, and encryption is one of them. Now, while we encrypt the data, what we have the plain text, the algorithm, the key. Combining all of them get us the ciphertext. Now that key is the essential component in any encryption. Now the key management is where it drives the entire aspect of the security of the encryption. How the key is generated, where it is stored, how frequently it is rotated, and what is the randomness that we choose while generating the key. So these are all the concerns while preparing the complete key management aspect. Now, what if the key management process is owned by the service provider? That is something we might not be able to completely control the the right mechanism of key management. So that is where the key management, it's an important aspect and should be owned by the customer so that they can control the encryption mechanism. Because once you plan to leave a service provider or probably plan to switch to a different service provider, what happens to the data? So if it's a part of our traditional data center or the computing environment where we uh, delete any data at our environment, probably what we do if we plan to degauss, if it's magnetic tapes, or we try to physically destroy if it is an SSD. But in the cloud environment, it's altogether a different ball game. So what is the best mechanism to delete the data in the cloud is encrypting the data and destroying the keys. Now, if the keys are held by the service provider, we might not be able to do that. So encryption or crypto shredding is the method for data deletion in the cloud. Okay. Uh, Whenever we choose cloud, the cloud services, the one of the important aspect is the availability of the services, and that is where the service level agreement needs to be captured and quantified in the contract in the contract that we sign. So if you have seen the uh, availability for the majority of the service providers like AWS, they provide 99.96%. So similarly is with Microsoft Azure and with Google Cloud Platform. So SLA is an important constraint in the cloud. Now, when the data is held in the cloud, we actually do not know where is it is being held. So geographical diversity and location is an important aspect, because considering the legal regulations like GDPR, where your data is traveled from crossing the European boundaries, which do not comply with GDPR, that's going to create an issue. So whenever we choose cloud, we need to make sure that we need to understand this factor from the legal aspect as well. Now, security in cloud doesn't come free. It means whatever we try to choose. So it's just a basic example if I try to put down here. So let's say your organization standard policy wants that any sensitive information which is being processed or being accessed in the cloud environment, that need a multi-factor authentication, not just the basic one, not just a one factor. It needs the multi-factor authentication. Now, the cloud services do come with the basic security packet, but if you want to bolt on with your additional features, you need to pay for it. It doesn't come free. So yes, security comes with a price. Now, the very important thing that I wanted to bring in here, that whenever we want to process our data in our own computing environment, which is like our inbuilt data centers, we have our control. But the moment we give our data to someone else to take care of, we want that piece of information should be as secure as it was with us. So that is where that cloud should be as secure as your traditional data centers. Now, that's an expectation. That doesn't mean that it has to be exactly like that, because that's it's not looks very realistic. But yes, we should be trying to bridge that gap as much as possible. Okay, so this was the exam mindset. We will quickly look into each and every domains on how the domain looks like, and let's see. So domain 1 overview, the cloud concepts, architecture and design. Now, it comes with the basic definition of the cloud computing. What exactly is a cloud computing? And it also gives the definition from different. So most importantly, we need to follow the NIST definition as well. That how does a cloud computing look like? What are the drivers for cloud computing? We just discussed that shifting from capex to opex, or probably transferring the cost of ownership, is one of the major important factor to move to the cloud. Is it only cost? No, there are other factors as well. That's we're going to discuss in domain 1. What are the different frameworks? So there are multiple frameworks which are essential for cloud computing. Just to name a few: SAPSA, ITIL, TOGAF, the Jericho Cube model, very important from the exam perspective. These are the few architectural frameworks that we need to understand in domain 1. What are the different characteristics of cloud computing? So it's just a high level of characteristic, that is on-demand self-service. Anyone can subscribe to the cloud services. Broad network access, which means it is highly available. It can be accessed from any location. Resource pooling is the essential component for cloud computing, because the resources provided by the service provider, it is being consumed by multiple tenants. That's what resource pooling is all about. Rapid elasticity, you can actually scale up and scale down based on your requirements. So if right now, as of today, if you have some requirement and the computing capabilities or the data capabilities, and tomorrow let's say your requirement changes, the cloud is there to serve you. And the measured service, which means you only pay for the things that you use. You do not have to take the entire year's the annual license and you pay for annually, even if you're not using it. So whatever you use, you pay only for that. These are the few characteristics of cloud computing which would be discussed in detail in domain 1. Now, what are the service models? The high-level service models that we understand as infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, which is also known as the cloud operating system, and software as a service. So which one should you choose and why? These are the questions that would be answered in domain one. What are the deployment models? So on a high level, we have four deployment models: public cloud, private cloud, hybrid cloud, and community cloud. What are the benefits, and probably what are the risks associated to each and every cloud? So cloud deployment models. So these we would it would be discussed in details in domain one. Now, what are the various roles in cloud computing? Right. So what does the cloud administrator do? What is the responsibility for a cloud application architect? What does the cloud developer do? And why do we have something called as cloud auditor, and etc. Secure designing principles. Now we would be discussing several attacks on the different service models. For example, if you're designing infrastructure as a service, so we need to consider the virtual machine attacks, the hypervisor attacks, denial of services attacks, etc. And from the platform as a service perspective, we might have to consider resource isolation, user level permission, and access management. And when we talk about software as a services, data segregation is an important factor as we onboard multiple customers for the same applications. And the application that we have developed, the security for that application, the penetration testing, vulnerability assessment, and so on. Now, what is the secure data lifecycle is? So we have 6 phases. The data is created, then it is stored, and it is used by the users, and it is shared to multiple users, and once it is not needed, we probably plan to archive it. So archiving is one of the stage, and when the data becomes irrelevant and unnecessary for us, we destroy it or delete it. So these are the 6 phases of the data lifecycle. Now, whenever we choose any cloud service provider, it is important to how do we have an assurance that this particular cloud provider is suitable for us? So there are multiple certifications that is available for us, which certifies that this cloud provider has actually, it gives us the glimpse of the security posture of any cloud provider. So let's say there's an ISO standard 27017, which actually gives us the guidelines for securing information in cloud. And then we have SOC 1, SOC 1, SOC 2, and SOC 3 reports. Then we have FIPS 142, which is actually any device which is used for which is manufactured for cryptography and has to be used in the federal agencies in United States. They need to be FIPS 140 certified. So if someone is claiming their encryption mechanism is FIPS 140 certified, it means they have a similar kind of security which is being used in the federal agencies. And evaluation criteria, like common criteria, so people who have read who have completed CISSP or probably read this syllabus of CISSP, they must have read about common criteria. There are 7 levels. And then if then there is a PCI DSS, payment card industry data security standard certification. So these are the major certifications that we can think and rely on while choosing the service provider. Now, domain 2, cloud data security, probably one of the important domains in CCSP. So it talks about secure data life cycle. So we just quickly discussed about the 6 phases, which were create, store, use, share, archive, and delete. Definitely, it's one of the important concept from the exam perspective. Now, what are the threat actors in each and every phase? So what bad can happen when the data is shared, or probably when the moment it is archived. So these are the threat actors we need to read about it. And what are the controls which can prevent from these things to happen? So on each and every phase. So whenever it is shared, we need to make sure that data loss prevention tool or data loss prevention mechanism should be invoked. That is gonna help us in preventing any data loss while sharing the information. Storage architectures. So each and every type of service models that we discussed, like IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS, they have a different storage architectures. So just to give a high level description about those storage ones. So in IaaS, we have volume, which is actually like a virtual hard drive, and the other one is object, which is it's very similar to file share, but can be accessed via APIs and web services. The storage architectures for platform as a services. The one is the structured one, which is like RDBMS. Another one is unstructured, which is just like streaming media content. And the storage architecture for the SaaS is we have multiple probably content delivery network, raw storage, content and file storage, and etc. Now, database security. Database security, what are the things we need to take care while securing our databases? So file level encryption, transparent encryption. Then we have application level encryption. How the data is encrypted and where the encryption engine is placed. These are the few topics that we would be looking in this under this particular topic of database security. Data loss prevention, or we also call as DLP. Now we would be looking into the components of DLP like data discovery and classification. Then we have the monitoring component and the enforcement, and how the DLP is essential for data at rest, in motion, and in use. Okay. Now we have data encryption, like how the encryption would be implemented for all the phases, like in transit, at rest, and in use. And when we encrypt the data in the cloud, what are the challenges that we come across? So different encryption architecture on the various service models, and we will also talk on various methodologies like data masking. What do we understand by obfuscation or anonymization and tokenization? So these are the few key pointers that we would be discussing under the data encryption topic. Now the key management, like I said, key management is a very essential thing for any encryption standard. So because if your key is secured, probably your data would be secured. So we'll be looking at the high level of what exactly is the key management and what are the characteristics of strong key management, and who should be responsible for managing keys, whether it should be the customers or the service providers. Okay. Now, moving forward, we have domain 3, which actually tells us about the security in the platform and the infrastructure, the cloud platform and the infrastructure. What are the things that we're going to see here? So we will talk about the physical environment of the data center. So not sure if you have heard about this term. We call it as power, pipe, and ping. So what is the power, pipe, and ping? So when we talk about the cloud infrastructure, so power is your electricity. It means indefinite supply of electricity, so that your devices, your infrastructures are up and running. They shouldn't be low in supply with the power. Now pipe is internet, because broad network access is one of the essential characteristic of cloud computing. That means your data should be accessible from everywhere, and it is only when your service provider is able to provide unlimited supply of internet so that your data is up and running. So that is pipe. And ping is computers are accessible remotely. Now, keeping these things in mind, we should not have any single point of failure. We should have the redundancy in place. Now, what is the network communication? So what is the cloud carrier? That's a topic we would be discussing. Now, there are how the address allocation, access control, bandwidth allocation, filtering, etc. These are the important things that we will be discussing. Software defined network is a very important concept from the exam perspective. We would be discussing the data plane and the control plane, and what is exactly the management plane, and the security aspect of every layers in software defined networking. Then compute. What exactly is compute and cloud computing? So the processors and the memory. right? So that is actually when the cloud provider provides a limitless processing capability. So but actually these resources needs to be managed properly. So it should not be like that one particular tenant uh, occupies or accommodate entire resource, which can make the resource exhaustion for the rest of the tenants. So they need to be managed and allocated properly, for which we have techniques like reservation, limits, and share in the cloud computing. Uh, then we have storage. We briefly discussed about the various storages in the cloud in all the service models. We would be discussing about its challenges. What are the challenges in the storage architectures? Then we have cloud infrastructure component like virtualization, hypervisor. A type of hypervisor. There are essentially two types of hypervisors, type 1 and type 2. What are the risks associated to them? And what is the management plane? So it's one of the important aspects in any cloud computing environment, because in cloud, whenever we talk about cloud, it is all about virtualization. And management plane is the entire orchestration thing which manages the small nodes. So that is very important, how to secure your management plane, because if that's compromised, everything is compromised. Now, risk management. So we are going to look into the various kind of risk, like uh, policy and organizational risk, the general risk like single point of failure, or probably lack of skilled resources. Then we have virtualization risk. Then we have cloud specific risk like multiple tenants and resource exhaustion. Then we have legal risk. And then we come to the non-legal, non-cloud risk, for example, like natural disaster, the earthquake and the tornadoes, and so on. I'll take a quick pause to see if anyone has any questions. So we would be looking at the design and the designs and plant security controls. So physical and environmental protection, system and communication, virtualization system controls. So these are the few design and plants. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Yeah. So what are the disaster recovery and business continuity? So when in the traditional computing environment, we have the failover systems, but when we move to the cloud, we would be discussing about the various disaster recovery plans for IT systems. So one case is where your primary site is your on-premise, and you choose cloud as your disaster recovery system. And the second case would be when you are already in the cloud, and let's say you've chosen AWS as a service provider, and your services goes down. Now it's the responsibility for the AWS to bring the services up and running by switching to the some other data centers. So that's the second scenario. Another scenario is when you have your primary site as your one service provider, and you choose the disaster recovery as some other service provider. And we also would be discussing about the basic definitions like recovery time objective, recovery point objective, and maximum tolerable downtime. So that was from the domain 3. Domain 4 is a relatively smaller domain in terms of the content of the book. So, but yes, it's one of the important domains. And cloud application security. So security in the software as a services that we need to see. So I have a question from Shruti, that is this only theory training or going to practice? So this is just a glimpse of the domains that is being covered in the exam. So we have 6 domains in total. Now, domain 4 is about cloud application security. Now, we need to determine the data sensitivity. Now, how we do that? So we need to ask the important questions on the impact. What if your data is disclosed? What if the service provider access the application? And what if the processes or the functions were manipulated by some external user? And what if the data integrity was impacted, or application availability was impacted, or what if the processes fail to provide the expected results? So these are the questions we need to ask to determine the data sensitivity. So if the impacts for these kind of things are very high, then probably data sensitivity is high. That's how we define the data sensitivity. Now, understanding various APIs is one of the very important topic, I would say, from the exam perspective. So we would be discussing about the SOAP and the REST, majorly SOAP and the REST and its differences. Then who is responsible for what, probably. So if we choose the software as a services, the cloud service provider has the majority of the responsibilities. Now, as we go down to the platform as a services, the responsibilities are shared between the customer and the service provider. And as we move to the infrastructure as a services, we have like the customer owns majority of the responsibilities, and this cloud service provider provides you with the basic infrastructure. So these are the responsibilities we would be discussing. Then we have software development lifecycle, kind of very similar to the traditional uh, uh, data lifecycle, development lifecycle for any software. So we have phases like planning and requirement, defining and designing and developing, uh, testing the codes, and maintenance. So these are the phases we would be discussing, and what exactly happens at what phase. Uh, we would also be looking into the configuration management tools like Puppet and Chef, and what are the security aspects that we need to see for choosing those configuration management tools. OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities, very important topic from the exam perspective. We need to know about, so 2017 is the latest list, so we need to look into all the top 10 vulnerabilities and how they are exploited, what are the remediation we need to perform for those vulnerabilities. Identity access management and federated identity. So we would be looking into the standards like SAML 2.0, WS Federation, OpenID Connect, and OAuth. Then we have application security testing. So static application security testing and dynamic application security testing. When do we perform what? Okay, so this is the high-level topics for domain 4. Domain 5, cloud security operations. It is relatively a larger domain in terms of the content. It's, I believe, like 100 plus pages of the CBK book. So let's quickly see what does the domain talks about. So data center. So what are the factors that affect the data center design? So location and compliance, the logical design, the physical design, and the environmental factors that impact the data center that would be discussed. Then what are the implement, build, run, and manage for the physical infrastructure for the cloud. So when it comes to for the data center design, what should we choose, building versus buying? So then we have different data center tier certification. So on a high level, we have 4 tiers of the data centers. So tier 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 being the highest. So just to give you a hint, so if you're working for, or if you have any medical services organizations like hospitals and clinics, they should be on the tier 4 because they work on the highly availability factors. And if you have the financial services, then probably you would choose the tier 3. And then what are the physical security level, the multi-tenancy, and how the placement of the server should be done. It is also known as the aisle containment, which actually means the how the placement of the servers needs to be done. Where should be the face and the back should be kept, how the air is controlled, and heating and ventilation is being controlled. and then we choose environment. So are we choosing the right geographical location for building the data center? So we need to consider the factors like tornadoes, hurricanes, earthquake, and so on. And what if the build, run, manage for the logical infrastructure of the cloud? We discussed about the physical one. Then we have the logical consideration like network segmentation and isolation. Then protecting the virtual lands, encryption mechanisms like uh, does anyone have any questions?
ये घर के पराठा ये मंगाया है ये कौन सा पराठा है ये केरला स्टाइल ढाबा है ये पराठा है उसके साथ चिकन डिफरेंट टेस्ट होगा
can you mute yourself?
Prashant, can you mute the person?
I'm just trying to do. I think he did. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, we were talking about the logical infrastructure of the cloud. So yes, the encryption mechanism we talked about. So like TLS and high availability in the cloud and resource sharing, etc. And what are the we need to ensure that whatever we build, its compliance is necessary, and it is compliant with the necessary regulations, because we might have the tenants which belong to the healthcare sector, so we have to comply with HIPAA or high trust. And we have or what if we have a tenant which stores the or processes the card information, so we might have to be compliant with PCI DSS. So these are the things we need to choose while designing the data center, or probably choosing the data center for us. Cloud risk assessment. So very much similar to the traditional risk assessment that we do for before we begin any services. In cloud, we have slightly different steps. We call it as framing, assessing, responding, and monitoring. Just to remember the mnemonics, we can remember the word FARM, FARM, framing, assessing, responding, and monitoring. So before we begin any begin with the implementation, it is very crucial to conduct the risk assessment to the logical and physical infrastructure. Now, a result of the risk assessment is going to provide us with a clear picture of what are the gaps and threats that are associated with it, and what are the countermeasures that we need to choose to remediate those gaps. Now, let's consider if there's a breach happen in the service with any cloud service provider, and in order to investigate the situation, chain of custody is very important. Not sure how many of us is familiar with the chain of custody. It's a term used in the forensics. So it means whenever the evidence is found and it is preserved till the time it is handed over to each and every investigation authority, and till the time it is presented in the court, each and every uh, each and every step needs to be properly documented with the that at what point of time this evidence was handed over to which investigation authority. So whenever it switches the hand, it needs to be captured in one of the documents that is called as chain of custody. Now, what are the challenges to the forensics and cloud? These are the things we will be talking in domain 5. And whenever something that sort of happens, the breach happens, we need to communicate to the respective vendors, the partners and customers, the regulators and the other stakeholders for the organization. That's very important. So how do we do that? That's an important consideration in the cloud security operation. Okay. Domain 6, and it's the last domain for CCSP, which talks about the legal risk and compliance. So we would be discussing about the legislative concepts, like what are the international and state laws, what are the intellectual property laws like copyright, patents, trade secret and trademarks, and what are the privacy laws. And the legal so the customer does not know where the data is located, so what all the jurisdiction is being crossed. So we need to make sure that these aspects needs to be considered. So like we discussed in the exam mindset about the GDPR. So if I belong to European country and I'm hosting my data to the cloud, I need to make sure that the cloud provider is compliant with GDPR across all the data centers in all the geographical locations. So that is very important. Now, standard privacy requirements. What are the contractual and the regulated PIIs that we would be discussing? Now, if we provide our data to any cloud service provider, what is the scope of processing the data? And are there any subcontractors involved for in the entire scenario? Because if yes, then probably those subcontractors also needs to be compliant with whatever regulations. Okay, now what is the purging policy and how the data to the customer is returned once the contract is ended? So if I plan to move from one cloud provider to another one, what happens to the data which remains with the first cloud provider? Okay, so these are the important factors we would be discussing. And internal information security management system, we would have the multiple policies that needs to be implemented, like organizational and the cloud computing policies. Then we have risk management in the cloud computing. It is the joint responsibility for the both the customer and the cloud service provider. But yes, like I said, the ultimate accountability still remains with the customer. It is customer's responsibility that is choosing the service provider wisely, because they are the most accountable ones. Again, the third party audit in the cloud. What are the challenges for the auditing in the cloud? Now, if I as an auditor want to access the audit logs for one of the service providers, the service provider might not be very comfortable in sharing the audit logs with me, because they might contain the data from the for the other tenants as well. So this is the one of the challenges that the auditing in the cloud environment brings in. Then we have third-party assurance certifications like SOC 2 report. Uh, then we have Cloud Security Alliance STAR certification. So it's one of the important certification for any cloud service provider. So there are necessarily 3 levels. Just to give a glimpse of what are those 3 levels. So the first one is self-assessment, which means that cloud service provider claims that whatever the control that I have for my environment, they are in particularly really good. So I have attested myself. And then attestation by any third party. That's where the third party auditors come in, and they assess the security of any service provider. And the third level is where you are actually committing to for providing the necessary controls to your customers. That is ongoing monitoring. Now, because I as a cloud service provider could not solely bring in with all the services, so I have to rely on a lot of third parties, which we also call as the subcontractors. So supply chain management is another crucial factor, because we keep on procuring the services. So if I am claiming that I have certain level of assurance in terms of the legal and the security, I need to take care that all my subcontractors, they also have the necessary level of controls. Okay, so this concludes the presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask the questions.
Hi Prashant, Shruti here again.
Yeah, Shruti.
Yeah. From quite some time I've been reading these domains, and I work on CCM and NIST CSF on a regular basis from last 3 years. So I'm looking for taking this certification. So
Okay.
if I opt for a regular training, is this going to be a full theory, like explaining all the domains and topics, or is there going to be practice exams and
So this was just a glimpse of all the 6 domains of the CCSP. And if you're interested in the full-fledged training of the CCSP, probably you can reach out to Infosectrain, and they can help you with the next available training slots for the CCSP.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I've reached out to them and they helped me to register to this training.
Okay.
I just want to understand, what will be the trainer's approach for practice questions.
Okay, so probably I believe like there would be definitely some practice questions on each and after each and every domain the whenever it is completed. So for whenever if you have any further queries around the training, probably you can drop an email to Infosectrain that how the training would be completed and what are the approaches. Or what you can do is I can drop my email ID if you have any questions around the CCSP as a subject or the certification. I can probably help you out.
So, there is an upcoming training next month. Are you going to be the trainer for that session?
That's something probably Infosectrain would be answering that question. I have just okay. Let me choose entire audience. I have shared my email ID. If anyone has any questions related to the CCSP as a subject, or what should be the study approach, and how you should be preparing for the exam, probably you can drop an email and I'll try my best to help you out. Related to the further trainings requirements and for those, I believe like Infosectrain is the right person. They are the right person to be contacted. They can help you
Okay.
out.
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
Thank you.
Prashant, Sanjay here. Good evening.
Yes, sir. Good evening.
Yeah, thank you for the session, first of all. And just a basic difference. I mean, basic difference in this, what are the values these each of the certifications have? Because I have a lot of confusion between CISSP, CCSP, CCSK. At the end of the day, when I relate it with my work, I mean, I am a security architect, so I am involved in the operations. I'm involved in pre-sale designing, and I have to coordinate with the governance and risk compliance team and all of them. So I see it's a mixture. When I see the syllabus of CISSP and when I see the syllabus of CCSP, I see it's a mixture of one and the same. But why the two different names? Is my mindset correct, or is there any big difference between them? I would like to know
Okay.
more about it.
So CISSP is the exam which talks about everything in security. It's a very high-level managerial exam which talks about bits and pieces of every domains and every aspect of security. So from data security to physical security, from security operations to encryption to incident management and risk management to architecture and everything. CCSP is very specific and narrowed down to cloud security. So I would say, because yes, CISSP talks a little bit about cloud security as well, but CCSP is in a more detailed version of everything that we just looked into this webinar.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so CISSP is a very broader way, when cloud is just one aspect of CISSP. So CCSP is talks about that one aspect is in a very detailed version in the CCSP.
So can I just say that CISSP also covers the traditional setups which are existing in the organization, and what are the
Yes,
information security practices we need to follow for them?
absolutely. Yep.
Okay. Thanks, Roshan.
Thank you. Uh, Difference between CCSP and CCSK. So they talk more or less the same thing, but yes, it is actually, so CCSP, the exam syllabus has been designed with amalgamation of CSA and CCSK both, and they also talk about what are the industry specific and what are the best practices that we need to follow. It is more towards the governance aspect, and it is definitely a vendor neutral, which doesn't focus or talk about any specific technology or service provider.
Prashant, this is Ajay here. Can I ask you one question?
Sure, please.
Yeah, Prashant, I just saw the glimpse of all the six domain, and
Hmm.
all the six domains looks very familiar and very similar to CSSP.
Yeah.
So, uh, I have only one question. Do the requirement of AWS or Google Cloud practical experience is required to go through this exam? Like
No,
CSSP.
no. So the reason the AWS exams are called as the practitioners, and this exam is called as the uh, professional. So practitioner is someone who actually looks into the technology and tries to implement it, and the professional is someone who just governs it from the security perspective. So it is more like a broader view, and it is not very specific to one technology.
So you mean to say that practical implementation is not required for this exam, right?
No, no. It would be definitely a good, an added advantage, but yes, it is not mandatory.
Okay, thank you, Prashant. I think you have covered all the six domain in a wisely manner, and I would like to
Thank
say
you.
thank you very much for taking up this session. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Uh, I will just share the feedback link so you can provide the feedback on how I have done, and probably what are the things that we can improve with the session. Feel free to put down your feedback so that it will help me and Infosectrain together to become a better version.
Sure, Prashant. Sure.
Thank you.
Sure, Prashant. Thank you.
Any further questions? So duration for preparing exams.
Just one thing, Prashant, if you have time.
Yeah. So this is Rajesh. Thanks, Prasant. And I was the one who asked for the duration, like for
Okay.
preparing this exam. So if for me, I've been there in the security domain for no more than 4 years now. So I'm been into compliance and risk. So I thought like, what could be the duration that we need? I understand like it varies from person to person, but to a minimum level of preparation, right? So what do you suggest?
So I believe like you answered the question yourself. So it actually depends on the person to person, but yes, I would recommend minimum of 3 months of preparation for this exam. In 3 months, one need to complete the syllabus, the content, the textbook, and probably for 1 month we need to invest in practicing the exam. So minimum of 3 months is an ideal period, I would suggest. But again, that varies from person to person. I have seen people clearing the exam in like 1.5 months. Then there are people who have taken probably 5 to 6 months in clearing CCSP exam.
Yeah, you told about the practice exams. There's
Yeah.
these practice exams are available in online, or is it like after taking this training, right? Is it something that Infosec provide, or is it like something like Amazon, right? So they provide some mock exams. So is that similar to that, Bhushan?
So IAC Square has their own practice test, and there are other practice tests available from all-in-one Daniel Carter. So there are the two major practice exams which are available, and you can choose. So I would suggest practice as many as questions as you come through. That is going to give you an idea that what how IAC Square is expecting you to answer the questions, and that's how you can proceed. But yeah, I mean I mean there's no as a set benchmark that minimum of 2,000 questions need to be prepared or something like that. I would just suggest practice as many questions as you can.
Thanks.
Thank you. So I believe like if you have any further questions, I've shared my email ID. You can just feel free to drop by, and you can. So yeah, recording. I believe yeah, if you need the recording for the session, you can reach out to Infosectrain because I believe they can help you out with that. Uh, there's website for any practice exam? No, I think you need to. There's books which are available on Amazon. You can find it there, and they do have the online simulation as well, I guess.
Any book recommendation, Prashant, like for CCSP?
Uh, CBK, the Common Book of Knowledge. That's the one of the important books I would suggest. But yes, there are other books and resources as well. We have Cybex publication, and we have all-in-one as well. But yes, I would suggest CBK should be covered once. That should be the primary resource for your reading.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Well, there's a question that CISSP is a prerequisite for CCSP. Well, no, that's not the completely true. But yes, if you are already CISSP, you do not have to.
I just asked about.
Abdul, your voice is breaking. I'm not able to hear you properly. But yes, you asked the question. I'm going to answer that. So CISSP is not the prerequisite for CCSP, but yes, if you have CISSP, it qualifies all the required credentials that is needed for CCSP. But yes, if you do not have CISSP, then you need minimum of 4 years of experience in minimum of 2 domains of the CCSP, and 1 year in security, something like that, because that the guideline is given in ISC square. Or if you have CCSK, then one year is waived off. But yes, if you already a CISP, then there's no as such prerequisite. You can directly apply for the endorsement of CCSP. Okay. Well, I think if you have any questions, like I said, please feel free to drop a note on my email. And for any training and for further training requirement, please feel free to reach out to Infosectrain. They would be more than happy to guide you. And thank you again. Thank you so much for hopping into the webinar. It was really nice to have you all. I hope you enjoyed the session, and thank you.
Thanks for your time, Prashant. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Prashant. Thank you.